What did the strange teacher at your school do that made them so strange? NSW. Made us write essays about dragons. Like the ones that spew fire and crap. He wasn't joking though. He really believed that they were real. He was later laid off because multiple girls had reported him for touching them a little more than what comfortable was. I had nothing but strange teachers. One of the maths teachers had a breakdown randomly, climbed into the bin, slumped down inside it and wept uncontrollably until 2 other teachers came to escort him away. He never came back. An English teacher used to throw things at people and occasionally hit them when he got particularly annoyed. The history teacher was missing 2 fingers on his right hand, so always kept one hand in his pocket. He was a recovering alcoholic and a pretty angry dude. He swore continually, smoked in class and could find the most twisted way of insulting people. I actually thought he was pretty cool. He just hated his job. The 2 pay teachers were complete party animals who went out drinking every night and spent every day standing outside talking when they were supposed to be teaching. Another maths teacher was a very old lesbian who tried to disguise her lunchtime boozing by continually eating breath mints. There was also a geography teacher who seemed to be an on-again off-again alcoholic. He would disappear randomly and when he was there he spent his time wandering about. Another English teacher, not a young man by any means, fell in love with a very young student teacher and started sending her sonnets and calling her up at home. He ended up retiring early. That's only the tip of the iceberg. My school had, and still has in fact, a really good name for being the best in the area. She screamed at me and kept me in at recess for simply having a small paperclip in my possession. I didn't even touch the dang thing. I took it off my math workbook and set it on my desk. Nobody knew why. Mr. Clippy probably touched her inappropriately at a young age and you went ahead and brought in one of his cousins to trigger a bad memory. You monster. I had a chem teacher in high school who was a total nutcase. One time, for an assignment, we tried making French toast in the lab. This resulted in 2 pans with holes burned through the bottom, and one chick in my class was nearly set on fire. Edit. I remembered that he tried the same crap again the next period. He was obsessed with wolves. He had pictures of them freaking everywhere. On Memorial Day, all my other teachers were talking about 9/11 and stuff. He showed us pictures of him swimming in Saddam Hussein's swimming pool in the Iraq War. He finally got fired after somebody caught him having a tickle fight with the 60-something-year-old male alcoholic janitor. One time another class dissected fetal pigs. They were keeping them in a drawer after class and one bag came open and leaked fluid all over the inside of the drawer. It didn't get cleaned up until the next year's chem teacher did it. Apparently there's also a stain on the ceiling from where he squeezed a pig spleen and it squirted all over. Picture, if you will, a full blackboard. The teacher, before wiping it clean, takes a thoughtful look at it and proceeds to wipe it. However, he leaves a E in the middle of the board. As he fills the blackboard again, the E fits in seamlessly. That guy was certainly dancing on the line between genius and madness. That sounds really cool. History teacher always used to tell stories about how he was in all of these wars. How he defended his house against tanks in 2008 with 2 of his family members and 3 AK-47s. Always connecting stuff with the Illuminati or religion. Told us more stories about how he fought 13 demons every day. Giving a speech about how much he hates gays and how it's wrong to be gay every day. And not really teaching us much about history other than his. Also he told us a story how he beat up 6 rugby players by himself when he was 16 while on a date. That sounds like something from 4chan. The science teachers at my junior high were the weird ones. One of them kept one of those vibrating ball toys, like the ones you'd get your dog to chase, on his desk, except when he'd show videos to the class. Apparently he'd turn it on once most of his class had dozed off and place it in his lap. There was a bomb threat one day and he jumped up when the alarm went off. Everybody noticed the toy fall from his lap and the fact that his pants were unzipped. The other science teacher wanted to go to med school but didn't, so he thought he was doctor. He'd medically diagnose kids in his classes with mental disorders or rare viruses. The real strange thing was that he removed a wart from his thumb with some sort of acid from the chemistry lab. Then the nail fell off and his whole thumb turned black over the course of the semester. I went to high school the following year, so I never did find out if the whole thumb eventually fell off. Dumbledore. An English teacher in my high school would rub her vag against the corners of the desks. It was always super uncomfortable, hilarious if you'd call her over for help and she's just subtly and nonchalantly working it while talking about Beowulf. For some reason I'm now singing talking about Beowulf to the tune of Car Wash. My 8th grade science teacher. He kept animal organs in jars of formaldehyde. Not so strange for a science teacher, correct? Well, in this case these were all organs he harvested himself from animals on his farm. He rigged the clock in his room so that it ran backwards. So at noon the hands would be in the 6:30 position. During our first lesson he changed his shirt 14 times. Anytime the office would interrupt us, he would respond in Latin. He had an entire wall covered in the front page from Weekly World News. On assignments involving answering questions, our answers always had to have the question reworded in it. For example, what is the order of the planets in our solar system? We'd have to do an answer like this. The planets in our solar system in order from closest to the sun to furthest are Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto. For students interested in it, he would loan out college-level books on subjects like quantum mechanics, physics, mathematics, etc. Best science teacher I ever had. Yes, I realize I forgot Neptune. I'll leave it standing the way it is, just because I can. He stepped outside to his car to change his shirts. He had a door from the classroom that led outside, and he parked near that door that day. Back then teachers did not require you to answer in full sentences if a word or two would do. He required it regardless of the answer and the question. Anytime the office would interrupt us, he would respond in Latin, only appropriate. I had a science teacher that told us he was a saint. John's ambulance volunteer, and his greatest moment was when he gave mouth to a cat. I'm gonna defend him on this one. It was probably a really gratifying experience for him, saving an animal's life. My English teacher would always smell of booze and walk around with a coffee cup that smelled like moonshine. We believed he was a recovering sober guy. Most teachers I've met are pretty much constantly drunk outside school. I guess he just didn't bother with the staying sober during the school day. My English teacher in middle school was a pretty strange lady, but I liked her. She was about 55-60 or so, and always wore some kind of animal print clothing, usually leopard. Depending on the top she was wearing, she'd have a lacy black bra that was very obviously showing. She also had a tendency to wear rubber thimbles for going through papers, but she never took them off, so she usually had about 6 on her hands at all times, thumbs, index and middle fingers. She had these clear plastic high heels that she wore as well, but I could never figure out why, because her feet were a freaking disaster. Bunions and bandages and varicose veins all up in that crap. I spent half the classes mesmerized by her broke butt feet. When the class pee her off, she had the scary, husky IMP voice that boomed down the hallway. You could hear her chastising the class several doors down for acting like a bunch of heathens, and despite her small stature she was the scariest woman in my life at the time, not including my mother. She was also diabetic, so she was usually sucking on some kind of hard candy that would clack around in her mouth when she was angry. You'd see her lips purse, then clack clack clack. Those paying attention usually shut the frick up when that happened. She was freaking intense, but super nice so long as you were respectful of her and others. Despite her dressing a bit like a hussy, as she would have said, she was a proper southern lady, and loved it when you behaved like a proper gentleman to her. I actively avoided the whole southern gentleman thing, because I think it's freaking stupid, but I did it for her. She loved me. Actually, she's probably dead now. That last part is depressing. My high school was a nut house. Some of the best ones were biology physics teacher. There are a ton of stories, but one of my favorites is the time he caught 2 students hugging in the hall and yelled, with absolute conviction, that was how gang violence starts. I forgot to mention that he made several videos starring his science hero alter ego Jack Terrain and would show them in class. Pre-calc teacher. He claimed to suffer from manic depressive disorder and would have episodes in class. During one class he lobbed some pretty inappropriate insults at me for talking, then spent the rest of the year creepily and profusely apologizing to me in private. He even cornered me at prom to do so. AP chemistry teacher proudly demonstrated her flexibility by putting her head between her ankles. This was directly after telling us that she and her husband met in high school. You STEM types are weird. I could write a freaking novel about my German teacher. I will try my best to describe him with little excerpts. So, we'll call him Mr. S. Mr. S was a complete lunatic. He was a squilly looking, balding, horrible comb over, nasally high-pitched voice that I wish I could explain further, but it really is just something else. He'd referred to classmates as freaks. He spoke German incorrectly, according to an actual German in our school, but still is teaching there. Yes, we called in. He had a fake tooth that he would take out with his tongue and scare kids with in class or hallways. Weird threats to students such as "I'm going to dip you in delectable sauce and let the ants carry you away," even if he was joking. Dear God. He would pace back and forth in class while kids were taking tests and talk to himself. Mostly whispers, and sometimes he'd giggle. Yes, giggle. He'd spit as he talked all the time. Hit my face once. Really pee about that still. I know Germans have a harsh language, but frick. Once there was a fight in the hallway. Usually a teacher is supposed to intervene. Instead, he sprints down the hallway to find a female teacher to break up the fight. On top of this, he had huge anger problem. He would freak out when people interrupted him or even when no one did. I mean literally dead silence. Then all of a sudden he would throw markers, chalk, which he claimed he was allergic to, and the color blue. What the frick? Markers, paper, pencils, you name it. Would eat bananas at his desk. I'm not kidding. I've never seen anyone eat a banana like that. I gotta think of some more. To go with this, we had an ongoing battle of pranks we pulled on the guy, which is a whole other sub. Some I feel bad looking back on, but he really was a prick. Didn't help he was very strange on top of that. My art teacher a couple of years ago, let's call her Miss Knob. Miss Knob was famous for giving 30-minute detentions. That might not seem that strange, however, she had a knack for giving them out for the smallest of things. For example, I once had a cough and said present in a sniffly way. She gave me a 30-minute for being silly. My friend once got 430 ms worth of detentions in one lesson. Sounds like your friend was going for the high score. He taught government during the week and did karaoke at a Mexican restaurant on the weekends. He'd also get super drunk, went by Cowboy Bill, and would sing and dance with students of his. German teacher that claimed I love kids but I can't eat a whole one. Math teacher that showed us video of his extensive Star Wars action figure collection. The room he kept them in had 4 different colored walls representing Tatooine, Huff, Ender, and Cloud City. I originally said Dagobah but meant Ender. Thanks you farts and butts. Also Hoth and not both. Smartphones my butt. Both were excellent teachers. The IC teacher at my high school believes in fairies. If you say fairies don't exist, you will be reprimanded. Sometimes her fingers are fairies and she talks to them. There have been many teachers in the district who were fired for watching pee during class. One that I know of who was arrested for fricking a 7th grade student, and several other teachers supposedly knew about it before he was fired. My French teacher, who I believe is a paranoid schizophrenic, and so on. This is what happens when being a teacher isn't a respected profession and don't get a high enough salary to entice anyone who isn't crazy to do it. I guess you don't get to make your wishes during class since your teacher probably has some way to detect existence of fairies. Bought girls chocolates, teddies and concert tickets. Commented on their skirt length, smacked a girls but 1 year. He was in a permanent teaching position, so he didn't leave the school until last year after teaching there for 34 years. Irish law is stupid. He also didn't teach us any of our course at all, and we're trying to cram the 2-year course into what little time we have left with our new teacher. Sigh. I had this teacher who used to cut up licorice with these gross, rusty looking scissors and give everyone in the class a piece. This went down every day. Looking back, I think that was very creepy. Everyone needs a little tetanus. I had a teacher who would knock on the blackboard with the chalk while writing and ask the class who is knocking. The dude was messing with us pretty seriously, I hope. I worked with a teacher that was really cool. He was great with kids, taught a shop class where kids actually made really cool furniture, and coached girls basketball and girls softball. Everyone loved him, including me. But he wore the same clothes every day. Every single day, he wore track pants and a track jacket. It was either the same ones or identical ones. No matter the weather, he wore the same thing. It was insane. But he was such a good teacher no one even brought it up. On an unrelated note, once we were in the bathroom and he pulled out his dong to pee right as we were talking. Dong like a baby elephant's trunk. One gym teacher regularly checked in on the girls in the shower after the gym class. He once broke a kid's arm by grabbing it. He once broke a kid's arm by grabbing it. Jesus' master bashin' hand is strong as frick. Science teacher in junior high would eat his lunch in the garden and talk to the trees. He also had a comb over and a pedophile mustache. The science teachers always seem to be the fun ones. The strange teacher at my high school was my Algebra 1 teacher. He would walk up to the girls of the class and put his hands on their shoulders, then proceed to lean down and whisper in their ears, "Are you having any trouble, sweetheart?" And then he would proceed to smiling like he was getting a thrill off of it. There was also the one time when in the middle of class, he was standing in the corner of the room and he began to pretty much feel up his nipples. Right then and there in front of a class of 27 students. It was goddamn hilarious to watch and at the same time was absolutely horrifying. He was then known as Mr. Nips for the rest of the year by our class. Most of the other teachers were pretty creeped out by him too, but he isn't the only teacher in my school who creeps out the other teachers. Got plenty of stories if anyone is interested. Time to tell more and karma W. I had a math teacher that would drink one of those tiny tomato juice V8 cans in every class period. We asked people in other classes and he would finish one in all the other class periods, too. There were 7 class periods a day. How was this dude not orange? Probably had alcohol in them instead. I had a priest as in religion teacher at my girls only school and we had a pole at the top of the class where we would hang maps of the world for geography lessons on. And this priest used to rub the pole between his legs, which was really creepy and physical. He also gave grades dependent on how big your boobs were. We once tried to talk to the headmistress, about it, but she didn't believe any of it. I had a math teacher in high school named Mr. Burner who always came to class baked as frick and would spend about half the class talking about random stuff, like one day he spent all class talking about Savant. I was disappointed but wasn't surprised he was fired at the end of the year. My old biology teacher used to make you do forfeits if you got questions wrong at the end of the lesson. Found out after I left school he was jailed for fricking one of his 15-year pupils. I had this one teacher in high school. We'll call her Miss Claudia. Miss Claudia would sometimes keep everybody an extra 5 or so minutes after class was over. It felt like so much longer, and just stare at everyone. She wouldn't say a word, unless you tried to get up, then she would shout at you to sit down. Miss Claudia wore Crocs to school, every day. She would randomly single out one kid some days to just make miserable. She would shout at them, randomly give them a 0 for a test, keep them after class. Anything to make that kid's life hard. But just for one day, and never the same kid twice in a row. Miss Claudia would sometimes eat burritos during class, with chopsticks. Miss Claudia offered several students, male and female, good grades in return for fricking. No one accepted as far as I know. She was far from hot and obviously crazy, nor did she get caught, to my knowledge. If Miss Claudia caught you doing something you weren't supposed to, she had a bunch of weird punishments, including forcing you to call everyone master or my lord or something like that, choosing a random other student that you had to hug, forcing you to sit on her desk for the rest of the class, throwing your possessions across the room and telling you to crawl on your belly to retrieve them. Miss Claudia sometimes gave impromptu physical ed classes. During her English class, she once brought her boyfriend to class one time. He sat behind her desk and didn't say a word, but judging by his arms, I'm pretty sure he was masturbating the whole time. I have no clue how she didn't get fired. One followed a girl to her house because her hair smelled nice and Miss Claudia wanted to ask her mom about what shampoo she uses. Miss Claudia was into some kinky crap. The best math teacher I ever had before college once stepped out of a closet during another class I had in the same room and simply walked out of the classroom without saying a word. The teacher who was actually teaching at the time looked just as surprised and confused as the rest of us. Another time I was walking past one of the main entrances to the school in the dark after a Friday night football game and noticed the door was open. I looked inside and he was just standing in the middle of the doorway staring off into the dark. I asked him what he was doing and there was a long pause. Then he said very slowly and without moving his gaze, "I haven't left this building in 5 days." I asked him if there was anything I could do to help and he said, "Number. The damage has been done." I was too tired to question him further, so I just went home. This same teacher would occasionally show up to class late, confess that he hadn't come up with a lesson, and then spend the period coaching us all in competitive bridge, the card game. He was incredible at that game and no one ever beat him. When he wasn't being incredibly strange or irresponsible, he was coming up with really interesting projects and generally making learning way less formal and way more fun than any of the other teachers at my school. He was awesome. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Carey. If you acted up in her class, she would kiss you. Yes, that's right, kiss you, and if you really misbehaved, she would kiss you on the lips. I'll never forget one kid in my class, Adam, really pee her off one day and she planted a nice and wet nasty kiss right on his lips. On a side note, she was a closet alcoholic. Didn't figure this out until later in life. She would always take a thermocup to the water fountain and pour a clear liquid into her coffee cup. As a kid I just thought she was being her weird self, but as I got older I figured it was most likely vodka. Plus alcoholism. I explained the kissing gave her some liquid courage. This was the early 90s. I am sure today she would have been fired for the kissing. If you think about it, this isn't a bad strategy for getting kids to behave. First off, maybe not all, but a lot of the kids misbehaving probably aren't getting enough attention, love at home, so the kiss gives them this. Also, getting kissed for misbehaving is way more embarrassing than just timeout or whatever, so they'll probably learn to behave at all costs. 7th grade math teacher would hit on my girlfriend, sit on her desk and talk to her, always picked her when people raised their hands. Guy befriended possums too and showed the class pictures of them on the projector. My wife once told me about a high school Latin teacher who did a number of odd things throughout the school year. The one thing that takes the cake is what he did the very first day of class. Everyone files in and sits down and waits for the teacher to introduce himself, but they are met with silence. A few minutes pass by before this teacher, a 60-year-old man, stands up and proceeds to climb on top of his desk. The class is sitting in stunned silence, wondering what in the heck the old man's doing. He starts to sing, and not just any song. He's singing Bohemian Rhapsody at the top of his lungs. When he finishes, they all sit there in stunned silence. A few people clapped, but everyone else just stared in concern. Like I've said before, he did some other odd things, but this is the strangest. On Halloween, we were waiting for our auto mechanics teacher to start class when someone wearing a full-body gorilla costume ran into the classroom. They started jumping from table to table making monkey sounds. A student tackled the gorilla and ripped off the mask like in a Scooby-Doo episode, revealing our teacher. And I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those meddling students. I was unbelievably sick in art class and my teacher offered to drive me home, then tried to run a bike rider down and laugh. Couldn't look at her the same after that. My year 9 English teacher used to stand at the front of the classroom speaking to us, with his thumb down his pants, just playing with his pubic hair. He didn't try to hide it or anything. There was one kid in my class who went to the same gym as this teacher. One time they just so happened to both enter the changing rooms at the same time. Said teacher just stripped off, totally naked, in front of the guy, and started talking to him about John Steinbeck. Again, I reiterate, he had his freaking dong out, in front of a 13-year-old student. He got fired at the end of that year, likely not for the weird stuff I mentioned, but just because on top of all that he was a terrible teacher. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.